Okay, so we're going to start with some acronyms at the beginning. So I'm going to talk about DDM, or data-driven marketing, for CPGs, consumer packaged goods. And we're going to talk a little bit about just sort of the past, the present, and the future. And we're going to get all that done in hopefully 5 minutes. So starting with a quote. "This decade will belong to the customer, and that is great news for the marketer. Technology is transforming choice, and choice is transforming the marketplace. As a result, we are witnessing the emergence of a new marketing paradigm, not a do-more marketing that simply turns up the volume on the sales spiels of the past, but a knowledge and experience-based marketing that represents the once-and-for-all death of the salesman." I don't know exactly what that means, but it was from the Harvard Business Review, and so it must carry some weight, but it's also from 1990. So that would be the other, when we think about the past here, it's certainly true that a lot of things are changing, the pace of change is quickening, but at the same time, when it comes to data-driven marketing, there are a lot of things that have been going on for a long time. And we're going to start there with the past. So in this, for me, I came out of undergrad in 2001 and worked in an analytics company with financial services clients. So we worked in the world of credit cards and analyzing that data. And those would be industries that really pioneered leveraging data for marketing. And the keys to their success, first and foremost, they already had a lot of very rich customer data. So just in order to transact with your credit card, in order for the pipes to work and people to get paid, they collected lots and lots of information about usage, credit history. And so they had that going for them, number one. And then number two, they already spent a lot of money trying to acquire people, trying to retain people, trying to cross-sell people. So the key ended up being, how can you take that operational data that you're collecting, and instead of just using it to make sure things work, how can you actually use it to get a view of human beings over time? And then how can you use that to improve your marketing? And so, and the other thing that existed there was a lot of very good and strong feedback loops. So they would spend millions of dollars a month trying to cross-sell consumers. And when you're doing that, you can set up lots of very good tests and controls. You can do lots of predictive modeling off the data, and you can very much optimize. So that was second key to their success. And the third one was basically that they had existing institutional know-how. So people within the business, even if data-driven marketing was new, they had a very good understanding of technology, how to capture data, how to maintain the integrity of data, and then over time figured out how to use it. And they had lots of good processes and tools. So that's kind of the types of industries that pioneered it. And when it came to consumer packaged goods, they had literally none of these. So you have no transaction data. You are selling through retailers, through customer at the retailers are your customers, and you might have some scattered know-how within the organization, but the real DNA of the company is going to be a lot more in brand marketing than anything else. So combination of all those things led other industries to kind of lead the way. And where we are at now, things have shifted a little bit. So some of the barriers have come down from the standpoint of the ability to actually collect data for consumer packaged goods companies. And much of that is essentially just the advent of digital. So the stuff I was talking about before, like credit card companies, when they were spending millions of dollars, they were doing direct mail, outbound telemarketing, things like that. And they would, their natural data capture was the capture of people using their credit cards and whatnot. So on the CPG side with digital, there are just a lot more things that they can actually begin tracking. And then there's been a very strong push because they have essentially beginning to compete more with retailers, with their own retailers. You have private label and stuff, a lot of pressure. And so if I were to tell you kind of how, as someone who one quick step back. So had the background in more of the kind of financial services type pieces. About 6 years ago, we saw that there was a lot of opportunity to help brands and companies who were newer to the game of data-driven marketing. And we started a company with that in mind. So have kind of that past kind of as our real foundation, and then been trying to help companies step up their game from a data-driven marketing standpoint. And there are some positive things that are going on. The level of interest and enthusiasm is through the roof compared to what I would have said historically. So there would have been a point in the not too distant past where if you were talking to someone at a consumer packaged goods company about how they can leverage consumer data, they're going to maybe send you to the research guy or just stop paying attention immediately, politely nod, things like that. So, but the actual like level of interest within these companies is very, very high, and and that's solid. So, definitely appreciate that. And then also there have been enough proof points from the standpoint of better tailoring content, better targeting consumers, and seeing that it does actually work. So whether it's kind of like actually generating sales lift or improving brand equity, lots of good proof points. That said, it's been also kind of a bumpy road. So from when I were to think of like the bad parts, there are some challenges as well, and a lot of that stems from consumer packaged goods companies having kind of just the legacy approach, which would lead one to say, okay, my brand has a bullseye target of this specific young mom who likes kale and yoga and these things that like very specific piece, which will be very useful for like kind of your aspiration, or you're helping establish your overall campaigns. But then when it comes time to put it into use, you'll get a lot more out of it if you end up focusing on like the behavior, like actual, like, am I engaging with the brand? Am I buying the brand? Talk to me differently if you think that I'm an existing buyer versus not an existing buyer, and figure out how to do that in a manner that's on brand. But we have run into some situations where instead it ends up literally kind of being like, okay, well, we think that we have some research that says that people who are good for this brand over-index in eating kale and doing yoga. So then the next step is, can you use the database and buy extra data to find me people who do yoga and kale? And then when you do stuff like that, the problem is that the data is no longer driving. So you're instead saying, okay, we have a preconceived belief and we're going to go like pay extra money to find that. And so that's an area that I think is just gonna be ongoing learning for CPGs, how to like truly let the data drive what's going on, instead of kind of having your preconceived notion and going and digging into the data in that manner, and recognizing that you have to be on brand and deliver a solid message the entire time as well. And if I were to think of the ugly part of it, the worst part, and we'll get more positive here in a minute, but the worst part is then if you have situations where you end up spending all the money, so you spend on MarTech, you spend on new people, you spend on lots of different things, putting things in market, but you're actually like not getting the true benefits of one-to-one marketing from the standpoint of better understanding your consumers, being able to sell to them better, make them happier, get positive feedback loops, insights, and things like that. And my general take about the future is that there will be some clear winners and losers in terms of how this all shakes out in the world of CPGs, who are, especially the larger ones, are all under quite a bit of pressure from multiple fronts, but also have whether it's scale or the legacy, the brand equity that they have, and the know-how that they have in the organizations, they have a lot of assets as well. So I think that in general, the positive trends that we talked about, they need to be capitalized on, but at the same time, some of the approaches that were pioneered by other industries decades ago are going to be key. So the first one is basically, so while a consumer packaged goods company is never going to naturally collect tons and tons of transaction data, at least the way that things are currently set up, because you're not doing a lot of direct selling to consumers, making sure that you do focus on building a first-party data asset. So you can get it to a world where you are not constantly relying on having to pay Datalogix or Facebook or someone in order to like glean insights or target your consumers. The foundation of it ends up needing to be actually owning data and figuring out the mechanisms for having a relationship with consumers that lets you do that. Second is just kind of figuring out how to apply it properly. So recognizing that things are different in the consumer packaged goods space. They're always going to be brand dominated organizations, and they definitely should be, but figuring out, okay, what is the mechanism for delivering well-tailored messages that are still on brand, even if the person you're delivering it to might be like not exactly your bullseye target or outside of your media target, and recognizing the difference between the shopper and the buyer, all sorts of things that might sound easy when I say it, but they're quite difficult to actually get done. But I think the winners are going to be the ones who really figure that out. And then the last part, just what is the mechanism for consistently and intelligently building capabilities within the organization. And I think there's good talk earlier about like kind of the manner in which you can partner, whether it's partnering with retailers, partnering with outside firms, but figuring out how to build that capability over time so that the opportunity in front of the consumer packaged goods companies is not wasted. And that is it.
How are the CPG organizations looking to build first-party data? If you take a brand like Unilever that you guys are working with, I don't know why I would ever go to Dove.com for example.
A lot of people do, so believe it or not. But so there is a combination of making sure that there are still plenty of people who do that. There's also like a lot of promotions that get run. There are a lot of things in the world of couponing, and then there are also ways to partner with other data providers. There are ways to partner in like sampling initiatives and things like that. So for instance, you can run campaign. Yeah. So is the microphone over there? Yeah. So for instance, we're actually doing something interesting right now with Unilever and Sampler, where as part of the, we're helping target a new product launch to the right people, and then they have there are opportunities for them to share, there are opportunities for people to request samples, and then that data can feed back into Unilever. There's like opt-in levels, and then there are also the people who are personally identifiable but not opted in, and we can target them more or tailor content to them more in media and things like that.
Hi, my name is Fatima. Could you actually talk a little bit about some of the technical stuff that you do, like in terms of modeling, techniques, and like other stuff when it comes to the targeting specific people, figuring out the segments, so on and so forth?
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure. So our company, we don't own any data ourselves. We don't have any like IP. We basically have know-how. So we use SQL and SAS mainly as our like data mining tools. R sometimes, Python a little bit here and there. And it will depend on the approach. So sometimes we're building like actual just response models. Sometimes we're taking a brand segmentation, which might be attitudinal in nature and might have been done through like external research. And we work to figure out how to project that segmentation onto the database where we don't have an opportunity to ask 90 questions to a set of consumers. And then we have, there are like algorithms that we run in order to say when we help manage like outbound communications as to like the likelihood of a message from each brand resonating with a consumer, and essentially like optimization algorithms that will then in the end help us marry up the priorities that the brand has based on the data that we have about the consumer.
So you were talking about bad strategies or misguided strategies, right?
Yeah.
If you can, from the recent past, if you can name a campaign that may not have went the way it's supposed to because of, because they didn't make full use of data-driven marketing.
Sure. I don't have off the top of my head like a campaign that people would be familiar with, but I do have a client that is not Unilever, for the record, a different client where we ran into a ton of issues where there was a big push, hey, we need to leverage data to like drive our campaigns. But instead it was literally like what happened was we got 10-year-old research that had been done on the brand that said, okay, the people that we care about over-index in these various things. And then there was a big quest to then go out and spend money to like append that data onto the database and then to use it to drive marketing. But then the data append was so expensive that ate up like 60% of the working dollars that were available for the campaign. And then when it was time to go to market, there was only like one message anyway that people were going to market with. So you had all this stuff that essentially like just a bunch of money got sucked up by MarTech and data providers. And then you end up in a scenario where you would have been better off just going relatively like mass. And I think that is, it's kind of hard for me to say like when I see stuff out in the marketplace because you don't really know what's going on underneath it, but there's a lot of kind of like siphoning off of what could be working dollars in media that it's fine if the incremental targeting and tailoring actually leads to benefit, but there are some cases where it's obvious that it's not going to because the end experience that is being provided to the consumer is no different based on it. You just like kind of, I don't know, messed around and spent a bunch of the money along the way. So.
Thank you.
Good? Cool. Thank you so much.
All right, yep, thanks. Oh, yeah.